and the slides will be available. I can send them afterwards. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see the slides. If you can't see the slides, please unmute yourself and give me a shout. So what I'm going to do today is talk through some top tips on running digital meetings, digital visits into the home.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
It's just me?
Okay.
I can still hear.
No, I can't hear anyone. Sorry.
Yeah. So okay. I can still hear you, Natalie. So it's not. Yeah, and Anna's just said she can hear. Anna's husband.
Okay.
In fact.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just Paul's got an issue at the minute.
Oh dear. Could you just pop in my message in the chat to say you see we're recording? So.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going. So yeah, so what I'm going to do today is talk through the 8 top tips for doing digital visits, and then think about the translation of that into research as well, because I think these ideas around the best way to do a digital visit into someone's home are applicable to consultations, interventions and assessments, and it's based on some work that I've been doing over the last 4 years, a research project that I've been doing to develop digital technologies to do home visits in occupational therapy, but also on a recent course that I've been on called Taking Your Research Online. So the first top tip is the 3 Ps of prior, planning and preparation. And under this idea of the 3 Ps, I've got some tips there. So first of all, don't underestimate the importance of preparation time. And actually, this doesn't change when you're doing a digital visit to a face-to-face visit. In fact, you probably need to put in more preparation time. And the best digital visits are well prepared. So also think about being there before the digital visit, just so you can iron out any technical problems, as I found out this morning as my unfamiliarity with this platform. I've probably broken my golden rule of number 1. The second tip is in sort of when you're scheduling interviews and you do this, the ideal that researchers talk about is 2 a day. But when you're doing digital visits, you potentially could do a lot more in a day. But the advice that I've had from other people is don't do that. You do need the pause time, the downtime in between visits. And it's really important to do your reflections in between. So think about scheduling that as you would normal interviews or visits. So the third one is to run a pre-session introduction. Try out your interview with a colleague or someone else. It's really good to get practice in doing digital interviews because lots of things go wrong all of the time with technology. You need to be really experienced in your platform that you're using. So do some mock tests is the advice that lots of people have given me. Number 4 is offer the session with camera off. You might want to do all your visits or interviews online or focus groups, but some people are uncomfortable about being on camera. So give that option. And obviously there's still the phone as an alternative. Some people will decline video visits and prefer a phone as an alternative. Number 5 is set the background on your visit. So think about what's in the background, what it says about you. You might want to have a picture related to your study, or just think about what people can see in your background. And number 6, a good tip that I've found is have a stand for materials. So I've actually got a metal stand that's for recipe books in the kitchen, and I'm using it so that my materials are at eye line. And what I've found with the digital visits that I've conducted in my research is that if you're doing a lot of looking down or looking to the side, it really interrupts flow and it's very distracting. So if you've got something there at eye line, it helps conversation, and you're able to look at the person and show that you're listening. And number 7, be transparent about the session. Obviously, if you're doing things online, people are more concerned about where that information is stored, who has access to it, confidentiality and consent around sharing of the information. So this is new territory for a lot of people. So they might be more anxious around those governance issues. So top tip number 2 is building rapport and connectedness. Now, this is something I find you have to work harder at when you're doing a digital visit. You might want to do more preparation around this. Think about how you will warm up and cool down the interview, rehearse some key phrases or have some icebreaker questions. This becomes more important when you haven't got that face-to-face contact. Online, it can be more difficult to read verbal and non-verbal language. It can be clunky and flow can be disrupted. So have a think about how you'll manage that, how you'll build a sense of connectedness when you're not there in the room with the person. Think about what feature you have available. So there's lots of, obviously, different platforms have different things that you can utilize to develop more flow in the conversation. If you're doing a focus group, you might want to use hands up and chat box and all those sorts of things, but really explore those functions before you use them with someone. Write down instructions. You can give these out before the session, and what I'm planning to do is send instructions out, give people a visual on how the platform works, create a playbook for the session. You might need to do more on that side of preparation. Eye contact is really important in building rapport. Look and listen is still important in the digital world, in fact, more so, to build that connection. And if you're going to do some looking away from the screen to look at materials or resources or to do activities, then prepare the person beforehand so they know that that's going to happen in the session. And I've talked to loads of people recently who've done interviewing online or focus groups online, and they've said obviously creating a sense of normal is really important. Invite someone to have a cuppa with you and make that as normal as it can be. So top tip number 3 is around your presentation of yourself. People can read your nonverbals, see you, hear you, and they can, if they can't see very well because of their screen, they can hear that you're enjoying the session and smiling and using humour. Consider yourself as a welcome visitor into their home, just as you would if you were visiting them, and that should give you the confidence. Paint a picture of environments together, maybe as an icebreaker, because when you go into someone's home or their environment, very often you use those environmental cues and context to start conversation. That's no different when you're doing it online. You can still do that. Obviously, ask open questions and have icebreaker questions on standby. Use the seek to understand principle, so you're questioning with curiosity and compassion, and make it fun as it can be when it's online and digital. The other thing to bear in mind is there may well be people in the room that you can't see, and that's something to think about when you're doing digital visits, to establish that for obviously confidentiality purposes. And also, there may well be someone in the room that could influence the responses. So obviously you need to bear that in mind. So top tip number 4 is remove the noise. So there's 3 noisy things that you need to be aware of. Physical noise and interference. I've interviewed quite a lot of people with dogs barking and doorbells going. Try and obviously create that calm environment when you're doing your research online. Be aware of the physiological noises. There's lots of difficulties with doing things online, as I've found. And there are some things that you can do, being very clear with your articulation. And I think that's why practice is really important, to practice delivering your topic questions or your interview questions before you do them. And psychological noise. So there might be all sorts of things interfering with that communication process. Assumptions and judgments and bias, just in any other research that you would do, but sometimes online it's more difficult to be aware of those, as there's lots of things you're trying to control at once. And what I've found is, obviously, you're thinking about the signal, you've got things happening on the screen, so trying to sort of minimize those noises is important. Top tip number 5 is a concept, a Korean concept, the power of nunchi. So this is about being able to be empathic, which is more difficult if you're not in the room with the person. But it really is important to see the person in relation to their environment, to talk about their environment, think about how their environment is going to impact on their performance in the interview, listen to verbal cues, pick them out and reframe them back to show that you're listening. Again, a lot of these things would be the same for a face-to-face interview, but they become more, you perhaps have to be more aware of them in a digital setting. Be aware of feelings that might be created by interference in their background or technical problems, that sense of lack of control and frustration that I felt this morning when I realised I didn't quite know how to share the presentation. Those frustrations are new to this engagement because it's a different methodology that you're using. Be empathetic, obviously, show that you're listening, and I think that's really important. It's more difficult to build that connection online. So top tip number 6 is active listening skills, which you would use for any research that you're doing, but really thinking about the articulation, your speech, jargon, that sort of thing, paying attention to the noisy 3 Ps, listening for contextual meaning and of being aware of body language, listen for openings in the conversation, because when it's online it can be more stunted and that's difficult sometimes. Use precise language, invite feedback and their feedback of the experience of an online interview as well, and give positive reinforcement. Number 7 is technology is terrific, but sometimes it fails us. So obviously be prepared. A lot of work you need to put into setting up digital visits, in my experience. Technical know-how is important, and obviously knowing how to deal with problems at their end if they've got technical issues and give advice. And that's where I think the playbook can come in. You can give some tips on what to do if there's a problem, like they lose sound or there's a problem with their internet. Have contingency plans. Maybe you want to have a backup phone call just in case you have to take it off from a video conferencing situation to a phone call. A lot of the things that I've done, I've had another person with me. So I have a wingman lady in the background that can help facilitate if there's a problem. And obviously that links back to the 3 Ps. Having, if possible, someone else in the home. So I'll be interviewing stroke survivors online. So I'm going to have a think about, do I need a carer there or someone there that can assist as well? So number 8 is about reflection, time to reflect after the interview and download, mentally download, talk to others about their experiences of doing online. I've been talking to loads of people that have done online research, and that's really helped me thinking about what I'm going to do. Write down any thoughts and reflections straight away, and ask the participant for feedback on their experience, because I think using digital technology for research is going to emerge as a stronger methodology in the future. Obviously, the pandemic has expedited our use of technology in this world, but it is a method that is becoming more prevalent in research, and I think will grow. So just to finish off some research online top tips, I think at the moment I'm thinking about doing this because I can't do what I plan to do, but it shouldn't be a second best. Actually, online research methodologies can complement what you plan to do, and they can give you different or improved outcomes, so it shouldn't be seen as a second best. So think about grading your questions. You might want to break them down further for online sessions because you're not in the room, maybe to do some clarification, or it's not as easy to do that. So think about manageable chunks of information, or providing the questions for the recipient beforehand. Think about how you'll manage if someone gets upset. You're not in the room to comfort them, and your subject might be quite emotive. So how are you going to manage that? And certainly in your ethics applications, I think you need to consider that and what sorts of things that you could offer for support after the session. Silencers on a line are more sometimes difficult than in person, but I think the power and the use of silence in research is very important to give people time to think and breathe, but it can be awkward online when you've got those gaps. So think about how you manage silences, maybe talk about them beforehand, that you'll give people time and you will be quiet, and it's important to give them time, but just think about how you might address that. Obviously sending them the guide to the session beforehand so they're well prepared. Think about setting some ground rules about online activities. You might want to ask them to try and minimize their noises in the background and their distractions. Maybe some things they might want to think about beforehand. Ask someone else to observe the session and take reflective notes, record it or do a backup. Obviously, those are things you consider anyway, but you can record digital interviews. There are loads of creative methods that you could use for online research. Helen Cara is a good source of ideas if you want to look those up. You can record. There are applications to transcribe video calls. Otter and Sonocent are the two that have been recommended to me. Not had a look at them yet, but I'm going to. Think about bias selection, because there may be that people haven't got the technology. So if you're going to do only online interviews and people haven't got access to that technology, then there's some selection bias there. People may behave differently online to what they do in person or telephone calls, so have to think about that. And there's lots of ways that you can protect confidentiality online using waiting rooms and e-signatures. And the other thing that I think is really important is to think about the mood of people currently. Obviously, a lot of people are suffering and because of COVID, and their mood may not be the same as it was last year. And that may affect how they come across online, or it may affect their ability in the interview process, or it may have affect their responses. So I think it is important to think about the COVID impact. Okay, so I will stop sharing there, and hopefully with some discussion. Hello. Okay, so that's really a collection of top tips I've gathered through doing the research that I've done over the last 4 years with digital visits. And I did this course, a 2-day course called Taking Your Research Online. And I have to say a lot of it was common sense stuff and stuff you'd already probably have thought about through, you know, doing your research anyway. But there were just some interesting tips about online stuff, which I thought was helpful. So I've put that as well in the presentation. So any thoughts about that? Anna's husband. Go for it.
Given that I'm here, I may as well ask questions. In your experience, to what extent has doing online only research kind of extended the whole interview process? Have you found if it takes longer or if it's the same?
Yeah, I think again there's a degree of control around that. So you know, one of the recommendations is that you do limit. You know, you set out part of your ground rules that you say we've got 45 minutes for this session. That because actually what I've found, and I'm sure you've all found this too, is it's actually exhausting doing stuff online, video conferencing calls, and mentally draining more so than the face-to-face stuff. And I think you've got to be aware of the fatigue that people are suffering. Just because of COVID, everything is fatiguing, but more so having these online conversations. So I think it's important to set some boundaries around time. Obviously, you could go on longer, but also I think you'll have your script prepared, and it will take a certain amount of time. And I don't think that there'll be some extra time you might want to factor in just because it's more challenging with the technology. There might be delays or someone's at the door, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think it necessarily extends the time. And I do think you need to think about what's good for the person at the other end as well, the amount of time they're on the call.
Thank you. I'm going to pass you back to my wife.
Paul, Stephen, Rami. Oh, hello. Hannah. Anybody else got any thoughts? Did you get any of that, Paul? I know your sound went.
Very sorry, someone was at the door, so I just went.
This is it. This is it. These are the sort of difficulties that you might have with online interviews or focus groups is, you know, people are dealing with stuff at the same time as this. Whereas if they were in a room with you, you'd close the door and shut all the noises out. All the interference is still there. And I've found as well when we've been doing the digital home visits, you know, you've got emails flipping up on your screen and things happening. There are so many distractions. And it is really easy to see when someone's checking their emails or doing other things in the conversation. You can see it. It's really obvious. So, you know, those things to be aware of, you know, with the whole, oh, they're not interested in me because they're quite distracted. And that's why I liked the idea of the book stand, because what I was finding when I did some digital interviews is you're doing a lot of up and down, and it's really distracting to watch that. So having things at eye line. And the other top tip that I've found is these rolls of, they're like white cellophane you can get on Amazon, 25 in a roll. You can put them up on your wall in front of you and use whiteboard pens. So if you wanted to put like your topics or some questions, you can just stick them to your wall, they peel off, and write up things so it's there in your eye line again. Just another top tip.
Natalie, do you find that conducting meetings online and interviewing people is more tiring than it would be if it was just face-to-face?
Yeah, I do. I think it's tiring for me and for them, and I don't know quite why. I think there's a sense of having to multitask more so than when you focus on a conversation, because there are more distractions, and because you might be switching between screens, or if you're doing a focus group, you're looking at 3 or 4 different people and they're all moving and doing things. I don't know, it just seems to require more brain activity, and I think that is tiring. And there's a temptation to switch off as well, which is awful, but there is more of a temptation to think, oh, I'll listen but not look, and I'll do something else. So, and I think that goes for the participant as well. So yeah, I do think all those things you need to bear in mind, and how you can create that sense of connectedness in the digital space, because you're not face to face. It is more difficult to do, but there's lots of things you can do. So one of the things I'm thinking about doing is creating a goodie bag that I'm going to send out to my recipients, and they'll have maybe some instructions in there. There'll be some information about the study. Then I might share the questions I'm going to ask them with. I'm also going to send them some biscuits, because I've you know, put in my fellowship, I've costed for the groups, and I'm going to do workshops and all sorts of things. I'm now having to do them all online, and I would have bought refreshments, so I'm still going to, you know, give them some post-it notes, a pen, you know, some biscuits, and try and make it interactive, try and engage them. Everybody loves a freebie, but I think, you know, creating that sense of, we're now going to have a break, let's all look in the goodie bag, you know, what biscuits have you got? Just try and make it as engaging as possible.
That all sounds excellent. Well done. Yeah, it sounds really good. Really good ideas.
Can I ask you a few very practical questions? So how did you invite people to join the online thing? Like, did you share a link in advance and then just waited in the room?
Yeah, so the technology that we were developing to do a digital home visit, we had a software that was developed for that by computer scientists in the University of Sheffield, and through that software, there was 2 ways you could access the platform. There was via a link which people could just click on, and then it immediately opened the platform for video conferencing conversation, or there was a QR code that you could have, and some people have QR code readers on the phone, and it just read the QR code. But we found the easiest thing was to just send an email with the link, and all you have to do is click on the link. And what I've found is providing people with the instructions on that very basic, you know, number one, you will receive an email. There will be a link. You need to click on the link. When you open up the link, screenshot, this is what your screen will look like. Immediately, you can talk to the researcher. You will have a conversation. You know, it does seem a bit Ladybird Guide too, but I think it needs to be like that because not everybody is confident. I actually changed the name of the first top tip. I called it prior planning and preparation, but the first time I wrote the presentation, I called it don't assume, because assume ass makes an ass out of you and me, because I do think we make assumptions about people's level of comfort with digital technology. And what I find is a lot of people are really afraid of it. There's a lot of people that have mobile phones that don't know how to use them, that don't use it for their emails. So don't assume anything in terms of people's technology knowledge. Go with the very basic and simple. And then I don't think you can insult people by providing really good instructions to what they've got to do.
Sorry, I think I might have missed that. So the online interviews that you did were not as part of your Sheffield PhD work, that was within the NHS?
Yeah, so before I started my fellowship, which I've only just started, I've been doing some research for the last 4 years with computer scientists in the University of Sheffield. And that's looking at doing home visits where people in the home show you around their property. And as a therapist, you conduct a visit online and get information and measurements, and then you file a report. So it's a part of clinical practice, but we're making it a digital process. So I've been doing that research for the last 4 years. So we've been testing out this way of working. And then obviously COVID came along, and all of a sudden the whole of the NHS overnight got access to digital video conferencing technology. So it's pretty much changed probably what we'll do going forward. But it has made this sort of thing more accessible and more acceptable, because people that are in the NHS now have been offered online appointments, have been offered digital visits and assessments. So I think because the culture as a result of this will massively change, the idea of doing a visit into someone's home will not be such an alien concept. But what we've been doing, and the last project that we finished just before I started my fellowship, was exploring people's views on digital visits, and that's clinicians and patients and the general public. And that work I'm hopefully just going to get published. But I think the thing is, we explored all those views before COVID, and now COVID's come, and actually people are thinking quite differently about using video conferencing. So, you know, it's a whole new world going forward. And so actually the idea of doing digital research, using digital methods, will not be as a sort of hopefully a second, a poor to usual research. It will be a methodology in its own right. And if you think about, I've talked to a guy from London who's doing some research with African women that have HIV positive. He was saying for him, you know, the hard to reach groups and communities, actually digital methods might be your choice method, because people might be more willing to talk online rather than in person. So, you know, it could open up other avenues.
Right, but then, so with the online methods, there's this whole issue on like data security and governance and all these things. So I was wondering, do you have any advice on how to solve this? Now that we are working in Sheffield, we have the Google Drive, right? And we can store all the interviews, like the recordings, we can store on our Google Drives, I suppose?
Yeah, so I've yet to look at my ethics application, but obviously the data management is going to be quite critical. But on the course that I did, there were quite a few researchers that had done digital research, and one lady called Professor Karen O'Reilly, who's actually an ethnographer, and she did some research using digital methods around Brexit, and she's well published in this area. And the sort of advice that she gave is, obviously within the universities, you've got your secure methods of storing information, so that should be sufficient for conducting your research, but you've just got to do everything you can to manage that data protection. So obviously password protect, and make sure that when you record sessions that they are who they say they are. They're alone in the room, or if they're not alone in the room, you know who else has been party to the interview. But it's no different to storage of any other information, because a lot of people record and transcribe their interviews and focus groups anyway. It's just storing a video. But the university systems should have that layer of protection, so information can't be hacked. So the sort of things they advised was, if you were going to record it, you store it immediately. Don't leave it on your home your home laptops and that sort of thing. But I think all of that you're going to have to think through quite carefully in your ethics applications. I've not got there yet, so.
Yeah, I'm just very unsure what the ethics committee expect. Like, if you, like, I mean, I just find it kind of frustrating if they advise, like, oh, you can't store this data on your laptop. Because I always try to imagine, like, what kind of scenario does someone steal my laptop and then, like, hack the video files and then do what? This is kind of weird, but yeah, I suppose it just makes it very complicated and time-consuming to come up with a secure data storage governance strategy.
Yeah. But I'm hoping there's someone in the university with expertise in this area that will be able to advise on that. So if you find anybody, let me know. Okay. So I hope that was helpful.
That was super helpful. Thank you very much.
Steve said the Google Drive is not considered secure. Yeah.
Hi, Natalie. Yeah, I believe that Google Drive isn't considered secure enough by the university, and you need to use a drive as like a secure drive that's issued to you by the university, so that it's like you and your supervisors can access that, and that's it. I've got a shortcut to that drive, so I've not been through the process of accessing it, going through all the layers of security as you normally would. I just press a shortcut and now I can get to it, but it is still obviously secure. But.
Sorry, this is just a special Google Drive, or is it like a physical drive that is sent to you?
No. It's a university drive, so you access it via the internet, but it's not associated with Google, because that's not considered secure enough.
Who is going to hack Google? But, yeah.
Apple, maybe. Microsoft.
Okay. So I hope that was helpful.
That was great. Thank you very much, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great to see other people as well.
Hi guys, sorry for the delay. The really last minute, but you met Chris, so, and I understand that he made comments or questions.
You've got the award for the best husband today, I would say, because mine's gone fishing. There's no way he'd be helping with that.
No, sorry, really sorry. I really didn't want to miss this opportunity, so I'm gonna take the notes that he wrote down, And yes, I mean, ciao Rami is a long time, and yeah, Paul, we met a couple of times in West Wing.